Hello fanatics, welcome back to Diamond Painting Fanatics. I am Cindy, and today is my Spooky Flings upload, and obviously I mean absolutely no disrespect to our beloved Queen whose funeral was today. So very, very sad, isn't it? It's just so sad. It's strange because I've only ever known the Queen to be on the throne, and now we have a king. It's a little bit odd, to say the least. And my mum was saying when Prince Philip passed away that it's all she's known. And it's just so bizarre to think 70 years. It's just so sad. Obviously, all of us are free to live our lives and make our own decisions. And the royal family, not so much. But yeah, absolutely no disrespect. But obviously I do my uploads on Mondays for Spooky Flings, and here I am on Monday evening. So thank you so much if you are with me right now in the comments. Hi, if you're watching it on replay, hi. Today I thought we could do something a little different. I'm going to go way back in history, and I'm going to talk about the Pendle Witches, or the trials of, to be more specific. It does get a little complicated at times, but bear with me. I will make it as easy as I can. I will be putting things on screen as we go, just to help clarify things, but very interesting. I was going to do the Salem Witches, which I will do leading up to Halloween, but as I was doing research and stuff, I came across the Pendle Witches, which is among the most famous witch trials in English history. So I thought I would stay at home before going to America. You guys are loving my Halloween themes. Obviously it's all trial and error. I don't know what's going to be liked, what's not going to be liked. And the fact that I did the history of Halloween, you guys loved that. You loved the quiz last week, although I did get told off by quite a few of you because obviously you can't talk about Halloween and not include America, because in America it's even bigger than it is over here. So I have to do American questions as well. But feel free to grab your project, come join me. Share your thoughts and comments as we go. And let's talk about the trials of the Pendle Witches. Are you ready? Oh, a quick side note. I am working on my Buddha, but I'm recording this on Sunday evening, ready for Monday, and I have finished it. So this is the last video of the Buddha that you are going to see on my channel. Yay! So I thought I would use that video because I had it on my phone, so yeah, I'm using up that video. Okay, are we ready? Have we got our project? Have you got everything you need? You got your pen, your wax, your trays, you got all that? Good. You got a drink? I have a cup of tea. I love my tea. Let's begin. The trials of the Pendle Witches in 1612 are among the most famous witch trials in English history and have some of the best recorded of the 17th century. The 12 accused lived in an area surrounding Pendle Hill in Lancashire and were charged with the murder of 10 people by the use of witchcraft. All but 2 were tried at a Lancaster court on the 18th and 19th of August in 1612. One was tried at York Court on the 27th of July in 1612. Another died in prison. Of the 11 who went to trial, 9 women and 2 men, 10 were found guilty and executed by hanging. 1 was found not guilty. The official publication of the proceedings by the clerk of the court, Thomas Potts, in his The Wonderful Discovery of Witches in the County of Lancaster, and the number of witches hanged, together 9 at Lancaster, 1 at York, make the trials unusual for England at the time. It has been estimated that all the English witch trials between the early 15th and early 18th centuries resulted in fewer than 500 executions. This series of trials accounts for more than 2% of that total. 6 of the Pendle Witches came from one of 2 families, each at the time headed by a woman in her 80s, Elizabeth Southerns, her daughter Elizabeth Device, and her grandchildren James and Alison Device. Anne Whittle, aka Chattox, and her daughter Anne Redfern. The others accused were Jane Bulcock and her son John, Alice Nutter, Catherine Hewitt, Alice Gray, and Janet Preston. The outbreaks of witchcraft in and around Pendle may suggest that some people made a living as a traditional healer using a mixture of herbal medicine and talismans or charms, which might leave them open to charges of sorcery. Many of the allegations resulted from accusations that members of the Southerns and Chattox families made against each other. Perhaps they were both in competition, both trying to make a living from healing, begging and extortion. The area around Pendle Hill in Lancashire at the end of the 16th century was regarded by authorities as a wild and lawless region, an area, quote, fabled for its theft, violence and sexual laxity, where the church was honoured without much understanding of its common people, end quote. Henry VIII in 1537 dissolved the abbey there, a move strongly resisted by the local people. Despite the abbey's closure and the execution of its abbot, the people of Pendle remained largely faithful to their Roman Catholic beliefs and were quick to revert to Catholic religion on Queen Mary's accession to the throne in 1553. When Mary's Protestant half-sister Elizabeth came to the throne in 1558, Catholic priests once again had to go into hiding, but in remote areas such as Pendle, they continued to celebrate Mass in secret. In 1562, early in her reign, Elizabeth passed a law in the form of an act against conjurations, enchantments and witchcrafts. This demanded the death penalty, but only where harm had been caused. Lesser offences were punishable by a term of imprisonment. The Act provided that anyone who should, quote, use, practice or exercise any witchcraft, enchantment, charm or sorcery whereby any person shall happen to be killed or destroyed, end quote, was guilty of a felony without benefit of clergy and was put to death. On Elizabeth's death in 1603, she was succeeded by James I, strongly influenced by Scotland's separation from the Catholic Church during the Scottish Reformation. James was intensely interested in Protestant theology, focusing much of his curiosity on the theology of witchcraft. By the 1590s, he had become convinced that he was being plotted against by Scottish witches. After a visit to Denmark, he had attended the trial in 1590 of the North Berwick witches, who were convicted of using witchcraft to send a storm against the ship that carried James and his wife Anne back to Scotland. In 1597, he wrote a book, Demonology, instructing his followers that they must denounce and prosecute any supporters or practitioners of witchcraft. 1 year after James acceded to the English throne, a law was enacted imposing the death penalty in cases where it was proven that harm had been caused through the use of magic or corpses had been exhumed for magical purposes. James was, however, sceptical of the evidence presented in the witch trials, even to the extent of personally exposing discrepancies in the testimonies presented against some of the accused witches. In early 1612, the year of the trials, every Justice of the Peace in Lancashire was ordered to compile a list of recusants in their area, i.e. those who refused to attend the English church and to take communion, a criminal offence at that time. So much for free will. Roger Nowell of Reed Hall on the Edge, Pendle Forest, was the Justice of the Peace for Pendle. It was against this background of seeking out religious nonconformists that in March 1612 Nowell investigated a complaint made to him by the family of John Law, a pedlar who claimed to have been injured by witchcraft. Many of those who subsequently became implicated as the investigation progressed did indeed consider themselves to be witches, in the sense of being village healers who practiced magic, probably in return for payment. But such men and women were common in the 16th century rural England, an accepted part of village life. It was perhaps difficult for the judges charged with hearing the trials, Sir James Eltham and Sir Edward Bromley, to understand King James's attitude towards witchcraft. The king was head of court proceedings, and Bromley was hoping for promotion to a circuit nearer London. Eltham was nearing the end of his career but he had recently been accused of a miscarriage of justice at the York court, which had resulted in a woman being sentenced to death by hanging for witchcraft. The judges may have been uncertain whether the best way to gain the king's favour was by encouraging convictions or by, quote, sceptically testing the witness to destruction, end quote. Elizabeth Southerns had been regarded in the area as a witch for 50 years, and some of the deaths the witches were accused of had happened many years before Roger Nowell started to take an interest in 1612. The event that seemed to have triggered Nowell's investigation, culminating in the Pendle Witch trials, occurred on the 21st of March in 1612. On her way to Trawden Forest, Elizabeth's granddaughter, Alison Device, encountered John Law, a pedlar from Halifax, and asked him for some pins. 17th century metal pins were handmade and relatively expensive, but they were frequently needed for magical purposes, such as in healing, particularly for treating warts, divination, and for love magic, which may have been why Alison was so keen to get hold of them, and why John Law was so reluctant to sell them to her. Whether she meant to buy them, as she claimed, and John refused to undo his pack for such a small transaction, or whether she had no money and was begging for them, as John's son Abraham claimed, is unclear. According to the 1613 tract, quote, Potts' Discovery of Witches, end quote, the devil appeared in the likeness of a black or brown dog with fiery eyes, in which Janet Device later claimed was a spirit familiar of her grandmother named Bull, which spoke twice in English, offering to lame him. A few minutes after the encounter with Alison Device, she said that she saw John stumble and fall, apparently lame, perhaps because he suffered a stroke. He managed to regain his feet and reach a nearby inn. Initially, John made no accusations against Alison, but she appears to have been convinced of her own powers. When Abraham Law took her to visit his father a few days after the incident, she reportedly confessed and asked his forgiveness. Alison Device, her mother Elizabeth, and her brother James were summoned to appear before Nowell on the 30th of March in 1612. Alison confessed that she had sold her soul to the devil and that she had told him to lame John Law after he had called her a thief. Her brother James stated that his sister had also confessed to bewitching a local child, Elizabeth admitting that only her mother had a mark on her body, something that many, including Nowell, would have regarded as having been left by the devil after he had sucked her blood. When questioned about Anne Whittle, Chattox, the matriarch of the other family involved in witchcraft in and around Pendle, Alison perhaps saw an opportunity for revenge. There may have been bad blood between the two families, possibly dating from 1601, when a member of the Chattox family broke into Malkin Tower, the home of the Devices. the family, not iPads, and stole goods worth about £1, equivalent to about £117. Alison accused Chattox of murdering 4 men by witchcraft and of killing her father, John Device, who had died in 1601. She claimed that her father had been so frightened of old Chattox that he had agreed to give her £8 in weight, not money, give her £8 of oatmeal each year in return for her promise not to hurt his family. The meal was handed over annually until the year before John's death. On his deathbed, John claimed that his sickness had been caused by Chattox because they had not been paid for protection. On the 2nd of April in 1612, Elizabeth Southerns, Chattox and Chattox's daughter Anne Redfern were summoned to appear before Noel. Both Southerns and Chattox were by then blind and in their 80s, and both provided Noel with damaging confessions. Southerns claimed that she had given her soul to the devil 20 years previously, and Chattox that she had given her soul to, quote, a thing like a Christian man, end quote, on his promise that, quote, she would not lack anything and would get any revenge she desired, end quote. Although Anne Redfern made no confession, Southern said that she had seen her making clay figures. Margaret Crook, another witness seen by Noel that day, claimed that her brother had fallen sick and died after having had a disagreement with Anne Redfern, and that he had frequently blamed her for his illness. Based on the evidence and confessions he had obtained, Noel committed Southerns, Chattox, Anne Redfern and Alison Device to Lancaster Prison to be tried for causing harm by witchcraft at the next court date. The committal and subsequent trial of the 4 women might have been the end of the matter, had it not been for a meeting organised by Elizabeth Device at Malkin Tower, the home of the Southerns, held on Good Friday, the 10th of April in 1612. To feed the party, James Device stole a neighbour's sheep. Friends and others sympathetic to the family attended, and when word of it reached Roger Noel, he decided to investigate. On the 27th of April in 1612, an inquiry was held before Noel and another magistrate, Nicholas Bannister, to determine the purpose of the meeting held at Malkin Tower, who had attended, and what had happened there. As a result of the inquiry, 8 more people were accused of witchcraft and committed for trial. Elizabeth Device, James Device, Alice Nutter, Catherine Hewitt, John Bulcock, Jane Bulcock, Alison Gray, and Janet Preston. Janet Preston lived across the border in Yorkshire, so she was sent for trial at the York Court. The others were sent to Lancaster to join the 4 already imprisoned there. Malkin Tower is believed to have been near the village of Newchurch in Pendle, or possibly in Blacko, on the site of present-day Malkin Tower Farm, and to have been demolished soon after the trials. The Pendle Witches were tried in a group that also included the Samlesbury Witches. The charges against whom included child murder, cannibalism, and also included Margaret Pearson, the so-called Padiham witch, who was facing her third trial for witchcraft, this time for killing a horse, and Isabel Roby from Windle, accused of using witchcraft to cause sickness. Some of the accused Pendle witches, such as Alison Device, seem to have genuinely believed in their guilt, but others protested their innocence to the end. Janet Preston was the first to be tried at York Court. Janet lived in Gisborne, which was then in Yorkshire, so she was sent to York Court for trial. Her judges were St James Eltham and Sir Edward Bromley. Janet was charged with the murder by witchcraft of a local landowner, Thomas Lister, of Westby Hall, to which she pleaded not guilty. She had already appeared before Bromley in 1611, accused of murdering a child by witchcraft, but had been found not guilty. The most damning evidence given against her was that when she had been taken to see Lister's body, the corpse, quote, bled fresh blood presently in the presence of all that were there, end quote, after she touched it. According to a statement made by Noel by James Device on the 27th of April, Janet had attended the Malkin Tower meeting to seek help with Lister's murder. She was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. Her execution took place on the 29th of July at the present site of York Racecourse. All the other accused lived in Lancashire, so they were sent to Lancashire Court for trial, where the judges were once again Eltham and Bromley. The prosecutor was local magistrate, you guessed it, Roger Noel, who had been responsible for collecting the various statements and confessions from the accused. 9 years old, Janet Device was a key witness for the prosecution, something that would not have been permitted in many other 17th century criminal trials. However, King James had made a case for suspending the normal rules of evidence for witchcraft trials in his demonology, as well as identifying those who had attended the Malkin Tower meeting. Janet also gave evidence against her mother, her brother, and her sister. 9 of the accused, Alison, Elizabeth, James Device, Anne Whittle, Anne Redfern, Alice Nutter, Catherine Hewitt, John and Jane Bulcock, were all found guilty during the 2-day trial and hanged at Gallows Hill in Lancaster on the 20th of August in 1612. Elizabeth Southerns died while awaiting trial. Only one of the accused, Alice Gray, was found not guilty. On the 18th of August, Anne Chattox, was accused of the murder of Robert Nutter. She pleaded not guilty, but the confession she had made to Roger Knoll, likely under torture, was read out in court, and evidence against her was presented by James Robinson, who had lived with the Chattox family 20 years earlier. He claimed to remember that Nutter accused Chattox of turning his beer sour, and that she was commonly believed to be a witch. Chattox broke down and admitted her guilt, calling on God for forgiveness, and the judges to be merciful to her daughter, Anne Redfern. Elizabeth Device was charged with the murders of James Robinson, John Robinson, and together with Alice Nutter and Elizabeth Southerns, the murder of Henry Mitten. Elizabeth Device absolutely maintained her innocence. Potts records that, quote, "this odious witch," end quote, suffered from a facial deformity resulting in her left eye being set lower than her right. The main witness against Device was her daughter Janet, who was 9. When Janet was brought into the courtroom and asked to stand up and give evidence against her mother, Elizabeth, confronted with her own child making accusations that would lead her to execution, began to curse and scream at her daughter, forcing the judges to have her removed from the courtroom before the evidence could be heard. Janet was placed on a table and stated that she believed her mother had been a witch for 3 or 4 years. She also said her mother had a familiar called Bull, who appeared in the shape of a brown dog. Janet claimed to have witnessed conversations between Bull and her mother, in which Bull had been asked to help with various murders. James Device also gave evidence against his mother, saying that he had seen her making clay figures of one of her victims, John Robinson. Elizabeth Device was found guilty. James Device pleaded not guilty to the murders by witchcraft of Anne Townley and John Duckworth. However, he, like Chattox, had earlier made a confession to Knoll, which was read out in court. That and the evidence presented against him by his sister, the little 9-year-old, who said that she had seen her brother asking a black dog he had conjured up to help him kill Townley, was sufficient to persuade the jury to find him guilty. On the 19th of August, the trials of the 3 Samlesbury witches were heard before Anne Redfern's first appearance in court late in the afternoon. Charged with the murder of Robert Nutter, the evidence against her was considered unsatisfactory and she was acquitted. Anne Redfern was not so fortunate the following day, when she faced her second trial for the murder of Robert Nutter's father, Christopher, to which she pleaded not guilty. Elizabeth summoned statement to Knoll, which accused Anne of having made clay figures of the Nutter family, was read out in court. Witnesses were called to testify that Anne was a witch, quote, more dangerous than her mother, end quote. But she refused to admit her guilt to the end, and had given no evidence against any others of the accused. Anne Redfern was found guilty. Jane Bulcock and her son John, both from Newchurch in Pendle, were accused and found guilty of the murder by witchcraft of Janet Dean. Both denied that they had attended the meeting at Malkin Tower, but Janet Device, the 9-year-old, identified Jane as having been one of those present, and John as having turned the spit to roast the stolen sheep, the centrepiece of the Good Friday meeting at the Southerns' home. Alice Nutter was unusual among the accused in being comparatively wealthy, the widow of a tenant farmer. She made no statement either before or during her trial except to enter her plea of not guilty to the charge of murdering Henry Mitten by witchcraft. The prosecution alleged that she, together with Elizabeth Southerns and Elizabeth Device, had caused Mitten's death after he had refused to give Southerns a penny she had begged from him. The only evidence against Alice seems to have been that of James Device, claiming that Elizabeth Southerns had told him of the murder, and Janet Device, the 9-year-old, in her statement that said Alice had been present at the Malkin Tower meeting. Alice may have called in on the meeting at Malkin Tower on her way to a secret and illegal Good Friday Catholic service, and refused to speak for fear of incriminating her fellow Catholics. Many of the Nutter family were Catholics, and 2 had been executed as priests. John Nutter in 1584 and his brother Robert in 1600. Alice was found guilty. Catherine Hewitt was charged and found guilty of the murder of Anne Faulds. She was the wife of a clothier from Colne and had attended the meeting at Malkin Tower with Alice Gray. According to the evidence given by James Device, both Hewitt and Gray told the others at that meeting that they had killed a child, Anne Faulds. Janet Device also picked Catherine out of a lineup and confirmed her attendance at the Malkin Tower meeting. Gotta love this 9-year-old. Alice Gray was accused with Catherine Hewitt of the murder of Anne Faulds. Potts does not provide an account of Alice Gray's trial, simply recording her as one of the Samlesbury witches, which she was not, as she was one of those identified as to having been at the Malkin Tower meeting and naming her in the list of those found not guilty. Alison Device, whose encounter with John Law had triggered the events leading to the trials, was charged with causing harm by witchcraft. Uniquely among the accused, Alison was confronted in court by her alleged victim, John Law. She seems to have genuinely believed in her own guilt. When John was brought into the court, Alison fell to her knees in tears and confessed. She was found guilty. Almost everything that is known about the trials comes from a report of the proceedings written by Thomas Potts, the clerk of the Lancaster court. Potts was instructed to write his account by the trial judges and had completed the work by the 16th of November 1612, when he submitted it for review. Bromley revised and corrected the manuscript before its publication in 1613, declaring it to be, quote, truly reported, fit and worthy to be published, end quote. Although written as an apparent verbatim account, the wonderful discovery is not a report of what was actually said at the trial, but is instead reflecting what happened. Nevertheless, Potts, quote, seems to give a generally trustworthy, although not comprehensive, account of a court witchcraft trial, provided that the reader is consistently aware of his use of written material instead of verbatim reports, end quote. The trials took place not quite 7 years after the gunpowder plot to blow up the Houses of Parliament in an attempt to kill King James had been foiled. It was alleged that the Pendle Witches had hatched their own gunpowder plot to blow up Lancaster Castle, although historian Stephen Pumphrey has suggested that the, quote, preposterous scheme, end quote, was invented by the examining magistrates and simply agreed to by James Device in his witness statement. Court records show that Lancashire was unusual in the north of England for the frequency of its witch trials. Neighbouring Cheshire, for instance, also suffered from economic problems and religious activists, but there were only 47 people who were indicted for causing harm by witchcraft between 1589 and 1675, of whom 11 were found guilty. Many of the allegations made in the Pendle witch trials resulted from members of the Southerns and the Chattox families, making accusations against each other. Historian John Swain has said that the outbreaks of witchcraft in and around Pendle demonstrate the extent to which people could make a living either by posing as a witch or by accusing or threatening to accuse others of being a witch. Although it is implicit in much of the literature on witchcraft that the accused were victims, often mentally or physically abnormal. For some, at least, it may have been a trade like any other, albeit one with significant risks. There may have been bad blood between the Southerns and the Chattox family because they were in competition with each other, trying to make a living from healing, begging, or extortion. The Southerns are believed to have lived close to Newchurch in Pendle, and the Chattox family about 2 miles away, near the village of Fence. Eltham continued with his career until his death in 1617, and Bromley achieved his desired promotion to the Midlands Circuit in 1616. Potts was given the keepership of Scone Park by James in 1615 to breed and train the king's hounds. In 1618, he was given responsibility for, quote, collecting the forfeitures on the laws concerning sewers for 21 years, end quote. Having played her part in the deaths of her mother, brother and sister, Janet Device, the then 9-year-old, eventually found herself accused of witchcraft. A woman with that name was listed in a group of 20 tried at Lancaster Court on the 24th of March in 1634, although it cannot be certain that it was the same Janet. The charge against her was the murder of Isabel Nutter, William Nutter's wife. In that series of trials, the chief prosecution witness was a 10-year-old boy, and Edmund Robinson. All but one of the accused were found guilty, but the judges refused to pass the death sentence, deciding instead to refer the case to the King, Charles I. Under cross-examination in London, Robinson admitted that he had fabricated his evidence. But even though 4 of the accused were eventually pardoned, they all remained incarcerated in Lancaster, where it is likely that they died. An official record dated the 22nd of August in 1636 lists Janet Device as one of those still held in prison. These later Lancashire witchcraft trials were the subject of a contemporary play written by Thomas Heywood and Richard Brome, The Late Lancashire Witches. In modern times, the witches have become the inspiration for Pendle's tourism and heritage industries, with local shops selling a variety of witch motif gifts. Burnley's Morehouse produces a beer called Pendle Witches Brew, and there is a Pendle Witch Trail running from Pendle Heritage Centre to Lancaster Castle, where the accused witches were held before their trial. Pendle Hill, which dominates the landscape of the area, continues to be associated with witchcraft and hosts a hilltop gathering every Halloween. A petition was presented to UK Home Secretary Jack Straw in 1998 asking for the witches to be pardoned, but it was decided that their convictions should stand. 10 years later, another petition was organised in an attempt to obtain pardons for Chattocks and Southerns. The later petition followed the Swiss government's pardon earlier that year of Anna Goldie, beheaded in 1782, thought to be the last person in Europe to be executed as a witch. And there you go. It's not funny, but based on he said, she said, with a 9-year-old throwing all her family under the bus, they were found guilty and hanged on the words of other people. And this Noel character said, oh, well, they confessed to me. Alright then. But yeah, the most infamous witch trials in England is based on rumours. And I think the meeting at Malkin Tower, which they make it sound it was all done in secret, and off they were doing seances and casting spells on everybody. It was Easter And they were probably all having a family get together and, inviting a few friends over. And then you have the court transcriber, not even documenting facts, but his opinions all along the way. I think the only fact he may have transcribed was that one lady had a deformity. Oh, it's madness. And to think that when we hear about true crime in modern times, the Ted Bundys, Ian Huntleys, Fred Wests, we think that modern day is the worst of the worst of humanity, but it dates all the way back. And I cover cases in my true crime story time that go way, way, way back. So I think crime has been around for as long as man has, basically. But these so-called witches were hanged on the say-so of, well, I saw them making clay figures. Hanged. Well, I saw them asking for pins. Hanged. It's absolutely insane to me. But there we have it, the Pendle Witches. And it said it was the most documented of the 18th century. It was one court transcriber's opinion along the way. It was sent off to Bromley to be edited. He added his tuppence worth in, probably making it less biased, or attempting to. And yep, you can publish that. That's perfect. Great. Thanks for all your hard work. I do believe they should all be pardoned, because it's madness. All based on he said, she said. And all of these people have lost their lives. And conjuring up animals and coming up with plans to kill people. Absolutely insane. But there you go. Please, as always, do leave your thoughts and comments with me if you're live with me, or in the comments section if you are on replay. I very much appreciate you spending time with me. Thank you so very much. I do hope you enjoyed this episode as much as you have the others. And next week I will come up with another plan, and we have a lot of finishes. You guys are like, wow, this is week 3, and already you are coming out with massive finishes, so well done you. I have finished my mum's Buddha. Yes, I have. The post review is coming up. I am now working on my Spooky Fling canvases, so yay. I'm excited. On Wednesday I'm going to look at a house. I really hope I get it. I really, really, really hope I get it. I have my heart set on this one. It's just down the road, a good 10-minute walk from my mum's. A 2-minute walk from town. And I can take you for walks around Castle Park and all sorts. So, I have everything crossed that I get this house. It's perfect. It's the perfect size, the perfect location, perfect for parking. Everything is just perfect. Anyway, enough about me. yeah, I shall catch up with you on Thursday for my live. I apologise I missed Thursday. I wasn't missed, so that was good. But yeah, I will be back Thursday for a live and let you know the progress of what happened on Wednesday when I go to see the house. Thank you all so much for your company. I really do appreciate it. If you are not subscribed already, please do so. I am doing a giveaway on my channel that I will be drawing very, very shortly, so please do check that out. And yeah, I love you guys. Love, hugs and sparkles to you all. Bye.